Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my program. I'm Armando F. Sanchez. I'm the CEO of the production company. And I am so thrilled. I'm so happy to have today an interview with a wonderful person who's taken it upon himself to record and document a very important story, a historical story. And he wrote it and put it into a book, Patriots from the Barrio, a story about Tejanos, Mexican Americans. And I have the opportunity of talking to Dave Gutierrez, who wrote a book, and we're going to find this book, going to figure out where we can get this outstanding book and get the background of what it is he was trying to share with his story. So let me just say before we start interviewing him that how really honored I am to have him on the program and highlight this history story that even I am not aware of. And I'm a pretty good history buff, but it's individuals like himself who dedicate their time to bring the stories to all of us and motivate us to look even into our own families and look into our own history. So enough set up from my perspective. Let's bring in Dave Gutierrez. Dave, thank you for being on our program.
Well, thank you for having me. Thanks for the invitation here.
Now, you know, we've been dialoguing before we did the show, and you've given me a lot of background, but let's go back to square one. You are the author of a book, even though you're not typically an author. You're not doing the full-time job. You're sort of a sidebar. What motivated you to write this book?
Well, first of all, I was looking to write the biography of my primo, Ramon Gutierrez, from Del Rio, Texas. I knew from a little boy about his World War II historical actions. He was captured twice by the German army, became one of only the few Americans to be decorated for valor on the battlefield by the Russian government during World War II. So I've always heard of his story, and then through genealogy research, I kept coming across newspaper articles on him. And as a matter of fact, I met a cousin online who I hadn't even met before through genealogy, and her mom was Ramon's sister, the World War II veteran. So after meeting them for the first time, and they lived here in San Jose, California, right here with me, I just never met. We had so many primos everywhere. After dinner that night, the light bulb went off on my head, saying, why hasn't anyone ever put his story together? So I started to do the research on him. And through research, I realized that he was part of a very unique and historical U.S. Army unit. And the fact that every enlisted man of Company E in the 141st Regiment of the 36th Division was of Mexican-American descent. They were a completely segregated unit, National Guard unit out of El Paso, Texas. And when I realized that, I was absolutely dumbfounded that this story was not out there. And so I continued to do the research, and through genealogy research, connected with over 50 different families of the men that served in this unit. Wow. And piece by piece, I was able to put their story together, and they all contributed, all the families contributed documents, pictures, and it's all in the book, Patriots from the WWII.
Now, I think you have a copy of the book somewhere near you. Can we take a shot?
This is it right here. It's Patriots from the Barrio.
Patriots from the Barrio.
As a matter of fact, the photo behind me is a photo of the entire unit, taken in, I believe, in October of 1941, just prior to Pearl Harbor.
A little bit of information for our viewers that may not be aware of. Why were the Mexican Americans segregated by themselves, as were other groups also? Why? Is it purely discrimination?
Well, I'll let people decide that. I just pretty much put the facts in the book. And the fact is, there was two National Guard units in El Paso. One, Company H, was an all-Anglo unit, and Company E was a completely segregated unit made up of entirely of Mexican Americans from the barrios of El Paso. The unit was federalized in 1940. meaning they became a regular U.S. Army unit now with the 36th Division, and they moved to Brownwood, Texas, at Camp Bowie. When they moved there, the 36th Division, what they did is they picked out other Mexican Americans from the other National Guard units, from like San Antonio and from other places, and they transferred them into Company E. They were a complete 100% Mexican American combat unit all the way up until they started taking casualties in World War II.
You know, since you mentioned that they started from a unit in El Paso, I'm assuming, I don't know this, I'm assuming that there were a lot of relatives, related cousins or primos, brothers in the unit.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what made the unit so unique, in the fact that a lot of them had attended Bowie High School there in El Paso together. A lot of them attended grade school together. They grew up with each other, so they were a tight-knit group. As a matter of fact, my primo was from Barrio, so he didn't join the unit until January of 1941. So there was action within Company E of the original Company E National Guard unit from El Paso, and then you had these guys from South Texas, Del Rio, Uvalde, Sonora, you know, places like that. But they were a very tight-knit group, and what the 36th Division ended up doing is, by pulling out other Mexican Americans from the other units, it made Company E a unit of veterans, and they really excelled in training and on the battlefield. They were the honor company of 2nd Battalion in the 141st.
Now, I want to get into the background of the history, where they ended up fighting during World War II. But let me ask you this question. Have you run into other persons who are also writing the story from a different angle of this group?
Actually, after my book was published, there was a gentleman from El Paso who actually wrote another book about Company E. But they reached out to me because everybody that they were interviewing, I had already talked to, and they had come over and said, yeah, your name keeps coming up, so we wanted to get information from you. And I actually met them at one of my book signing events in Sacramento. You know, the more stories that get published of these men, the better. So.
Okay, can you show us the front of the book again? I just want to make sure that our viewers, you know, get it again. Patriots from the Barrio. Okay. And when did the book go out to be published, and how many books are in circulation right now?
The book was published in, let's see, I'm trying to remember here, in August of 2014. So it's been out there for a while. I haven't checked on the numbers, but I know it's doing well on Amazon.com and Barnes and Noble. And for a while there, I self-published the book through Ex Libris, and it did make one of their bestsellers list.
Fantastic, fantastic. When you started writing the book, did you figure, you know, no one's going to read this, or did you say, you know what, this story has to get out, and whether people read it or not? What was your feeling when you first initiated the idea of starting writing?
Right. Well, one of the things that really helped me to do this, because I'm not a writer, you know, by profession. I am now. I can say that I am now.
You're a professional writer now.
Yeah, I'm a professional writer now. But during that process, I think what really helped me was that I was always an avid reader. So I always had a book in my hand, and I was always reading something. And by reading different authors and stuff like that, it gives you a little bit of structure of how they put their stories together. And I think another thing that helped me was my dad always was telling stories. He was always telling stories. And I think that propelled me to tell my own story of the men of Company E. And yeah, it was the part of the process of telling the story of the men of Company E was actually learning how to write a book. So I had to teach myself how to write a book, basically. But I did have a lot of help along the way. Another gentleman, Antonio Carvajal from Del Rio, Texas, also, because I was doing research on everything. I wanted to know more about Del Rio, Texas, where my family had come from. And while doing research, I came across his book. Antonio Carvajal became an educator in universities, and to see how he told his story, how he grew up in the Barrio San Felipe in Del Rio, and became a very successful educator. I was very inspired to continue to write this book, and I reached out to Tony, and Tony, in turn, became my editor. Really, he basically showed me how to put the story together. He was when I sent him the manuscript, he took a look at it and he goes, "Wow, I didn't even know anything of the story, but you have a lot of heart in the way you write, and let me show you how we can put it together." And he really became my editor.
That's really great. So you had a mentor, if you will. So
Right,
did you travel?
right.
So did you find yourself traveling a lot back home, to continue the research?
No, and I wish I was able to do that.
Awesome. Okay. All right.
To be able to do the research on a little bit in depth. But there's so much out there as far as research. You just have to go in there and dig in and roll up your sleeves and do the research.
Now tell us the story. What made Company stand out in World War II?
Well, first of all, the fact that they were all of Mexican American descent. But this is what they did. In April of 1943, they were deployed to North Africa. Shortly after North Africa was freed from Axis powers, they pushed the Germans back out of North Africa, and the Allies then went ahead and did the Sicily operation. Now, the 36th Division was kept out of the Sicily operation. They were assigned to the 5th Army under General Mark Clark. But after Sicily, what was left was the European mainland, and the 36th Division spearheaded the invasion at Salerno, Italy on September 9, 1943. And they became the first American unit to set foot on what Hitler called Fortress Europe, their mainland, their main continent in Europe. And it was there at Salerno that my primo Ramon would later be awarded the Silver Star and the Russian medal that I had talked about. When they first landed at Salerno, they were one of the first units on the beach, so no artillery was there, and they came across our German tanks. So here they were fighting off German tanks with basic infantry weapons, and they came across the German tanks and a machine gun nest, and they were taking casualties. And Ramon, my primo, ended up charging the machine gun nest with his BAR, firing at the machine gun nest. He was hit in the arm. He lost the machine gun, his BAR, and he continued
very heavy
to charge
to
the
carry.
machine gun.
Yeah.
He continued to charge the machine gun nest and ended up silencing the machine gun nest with hand grenades, and then jumping into the foxhole and killing the last German soldier in hand-to-hand combat. For that action, he was awarded the Silver Star by the U.S. Army, and later the Soviet Union would award him the Order of Patriotic War, 2nd degree, for his actions at Salerno. Now, after Salerno,
how did that happen that he ended up being recognized by the Soviet Union?
That's a good point. During the invasion, the Soviet Union was one of our allies during World War II. They had sent a Russian observer to observe what was happening at Salerno. And the reason why the Russians were very eager to find out what was happening on this new front that the Allies were opening up is because the the Russian army had already been fighting the Germans for years on the Eastern Front. So they were very eager to see what the Allies were going to do on this new front. And that's why they sent an observer. And when the observer overheard of a U.S. Army soldier silencing a machine gun the way he did without a weapon in his hand and killing a German soldier in hand-to-hand combat, he was very inspired by this story. And he put in for the Russian medal for Ramon.
Wow, what an awesome story. Now, how many persons, Mexican Americans, were part of the group that, you know, and this is probably just, may not be factual given time has lapsed, but do you have an approximate idea how many were in the company, Company E, and then how many actually returned?
Sure. Well, the unit started out with 250 men. The photo behind me, there's 250 men there in Brownwood, Texas in October of 1941. Let's see here. After Salerno, the 36th Division continued to fight throughout Italy. They fought at Mount Rotundo. They fought at the Battle of San Pietro, took heavy losses at San Pietro. And then they became connected with a battle, the Rapido River Battle, that became one of the most controversial battles of World War II, as a matter of fact, is the Rapido River crossing, where in a span of 48 hours, the 36th Division would go on to lose over 2,000 men in that one battle. During the Rapido River crossing, just prior to the Rapido River crossing, Company E had 154 men that crossed the Rapido River that day, and only 37 of them came back. Now, they were either killed, wounded, or captured at the Rapido River. As a matter of fact, Ramon, the first time he was captured by the German army was at the Rapido River.
Wait. What do you mean the first time?
He was actually captured twice by the German army and escaped both times, making it back across Allied lines. Now, Ramon was captured at the Rapido River, and it took a few hours for him to get away from them, and he made it back across the river. He was one of only 37 men to come back from that Rapido River crossing of Company E.
Wow.
Later on, he fought at the Battle of Anzio and at the Battle of Velletri, and he was captured again at the Battle of Velletri. Spent a couple of days being tortured by the German army for information. When an Allied bomb hit the shelter that he was in, and with all the confusion, he was able to escape. A couple of villagers near the area where he was being kept hid him for several days until he came across Allies that were already coming in close to Rome.
Wow, that's the story. And chances are, I would assume that a certain number of these very brave men in this company, in this unit, are probably buried in military burials in Italy, because they didn't all bring. They don't bring them back. A lot of them were.
No, they did
actually
not.
Still there. Right.
No, they did not. And some of them are buried there. And a lot of the families of these men have not been able to make the trip out there to Italy. After the book was published, by the way, I started getting more connections with even more men of the company, of their families. And one of them that stood out to me was somebody I wanted to write about that I was not able to write about in the book, was Lorenzo Macias from El Paso, Texas, because I know that he was killed in action in Italy after the Battle of San Pietro. So 2 days before Christmas, in 1943, he was killed in action in Italy. And after the book was published, one of his nieces reached out to me and said, yeah, my uncle was part of this. He recognized her name was Macias. I said, by any chance, are you related to Lorenzo Macias of company? She said, yes, that is my uncle. And remarkable that she remembers him vaguely. She was only 3 years old when he went off to war. And I'm happy to say that Elena Macias of El Cerritos, California, was just this year made the trip to Italy to visit where Lorenzo is buried in Italy.
Wow. What a story. If you had not written this book, and again, could you show me the book, please? Could you show it to our viewers, please?
Sure.
Please. Okay. And so what does it say in the front? I can't make it up.
Patriots from the Barrio.
Uh-huh. Should be in every library, in every school in the nation, you know, and beyond. Respect. What do you think would have happened? We're speculating. If you hadn't written the book.
Well, the biggest thing is, I think their story would have basically faded away, unfortunately. And that's one of the things that as I became connected with these families, I was not only writing my primo story anymore. Now I was writing the story of all these men that served bravely in World War II and that really have not been recognized the way they should have been. And I don't want, one of the reasons why I wrote the book is I don't want their story to be forgotten. Their sacrifice to this country and their valor in defense of our nation should never be forgotten. And I just want to make sure that we continue to pass that on. And one of the great things that has come about writing this book is these men formed a very unique bond. I think it's one of the most strongest bonds known to human beings is men that have served in battle together. That is a bond that is really unbreakable. And now, with the connection of over these 50 different families of the men that served, we're going to continue on that bond. And that is my goal. I don't want their story to end.
Wow, that's fantastic. Again, name of your book is Patriots from the Barrio. Where can our viewers find your book, please?
The book is available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. There are several Barnes and Noble bookstores that are carrying the book. Several libraries have carried it. You can find it on the iTunes bookstore. It's pretty much anywhere you sell books.
Wonderful. Patriots from the Barrio from Dave Gutierrez. Dave, unfortunately, you know, we could go on for hours and talk about all the different sections of your book. But, you know, I do want to give you some time for closure, for summary of your outstanding book, Patriots from the Barrio.
Thank you. Yeah, well, again, the message that I wanted to get across was the contributions of Mexican Americans during World War II. I think they've been in the shadows. I really don't want them to be in the shadows. I'm looking to make sure that we tell our stories. And that's one of the things that Latinos, I think we can do better. I think we can do better of documenting and recording our own history. And this is one good example right here. This is a story that took place over 70 years ago. And why did it take 70 years for someone to come around and write their story?
Well, thank goodness somebody came around.
So I think we need to figure out how we can influence young Latino writers to continue writing our own history. Again, if we don't write it, nobody's going to be breaking down doors to try to write our own history. We're going to have to do it ourselves.
Well, it's a call to action. I can sense that. The whole idea is, you know, if someone who is viewing, you have access to family members or somewhere primos or someone, and it doesn't have to be World War II. I mean, obviously, unfortunately, we have a series of wars. You know, document the stories. It is important, even if they themselves may not want to share it. It's important to document it for like you say, the nation to recognize it, the community to recognize it, and la familia to recognize what happened.
Absolutely. And there is a couple of the social issues that I did touch upon in the book. Obviously, the segregation of schools, the Bracero program, the repatriation that happened in the 1930s, where Mexican Americans were being deported by the United States government during the time. And let me say that again real slowly. Mexican Americans were being deported by the United States government during the repatriation. And I do touch upon that subject because I wanted to make sure that the readers understood what these men went through. These were men that were part of our greatest generation, which means they grew up during the Great Depression, and they lived through the Mexican repatriation, served our country when our country needed them the most, and they deserve not to be forgotten.
Amen. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to a closure, but again, I want to thank Dave Gutierrez, author of Patriots from the Barrio. Dave, if someone would like to get in contact with you, is there sort of a Facebook page somewhere that persons can contact you and get more information or be able to contribute information on Unity?
Yeah, absolutely. We do run a I do run a Facebook page, so you can look it up. Dave, author Dave Gutierrez, and if you just Google it, or on Facebook, do a search on Dave Gutierrez, Patriots from the Barrio, my page will come right up. And it's a good place. It's a good place for people to keep track of events. Like I'll be doing speaking engagements. I'll be in El Paso doing a lecture on August 10th. So those of you in the El Paso area, I'll be there at the El Paso Museum of History on August 10th at 6 p.m.
Dave, I wish you continued success. Aplauso fuerte for taking your time, because it is very time consuming and not knowing, how this was all going to come about. But thank goodness you took the leadership to push yourself and motivate yourself to do it. And I'm hoping that a lot of our viewers take it upon themselves to say, I'm going to follow in your footsteps. So again, Dave, Dave, thank you very much. Un aplauso.
Gracias.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Armando F. Sanchez. I'm the CEO, Armando F. Sanchez Production. And it's been our honor to have today Dave Gutierrez on his wonderful book. Please go out and get it. Get your library to go get the book. Have it accessed. Make sure that the high schools, the senior schools, every school has a copy of it and available to the kids. And have the kids, invite them to go and find the books and open it and see where they can tie in themselves their own personal story of La Familia. And, in one tiny pitch, don't assume that it's all males. There are a lot of women that are working either directly or behind the scenes in the military who are also contributing. Those stories also must be brought to the surface. And a lot of Latinas were actually part of the WWII. A lot of women, Latinas, were part of the groups that were building a lot of machinery and tools and equipment that was used in World War II. So, those stories need to also be brought up. And please, if you do know the story, go out and get it. And all this message comes from the work of Dave Gutierrez with this work. Dave, I wish you continued success to your book, Patriots from the Barrio. I hope to have you in future programs highlighting what additional information you've come up with. And everyone who's watching the show, please go get the book, Patriots from the Barrio. Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.